Hi, and welcome back to RV and Newbie to Pro. Our newest challenge deals with our environmental system, the air conditioning and heat pump. What was happening was the front heat pump air conditioner was working, but the back one was not. It wasn't getting any electricity to it. Once we tested the leads, we knew that the unit was not getting powered, so we traced the problem back to the energy management system. What we do on our energy management system is I have a board up front that I can control the amperage that's coming in, whether it's a 30 amp or 50 amp. And then the energy management system will then determine if I'm on 50, it just lets everything run as it needs to. If it's on a 30 amp system, then it starts things so I don't draw too much electricity. And what happened was, there's a board back here, and I'll take this off and show it to you in a minute. That board has relays on it, and the relays failed. And they failed, in my opinion, because of the heat. Because this gets warm and there's no airflow. It is behind these cabinet doors, then you have a steel door, you have your 110 volt panel box, and you have a panel box for 12 volt. The problem was in the 110 volt. It was just getting too warm. So what we're going to do to prevent that, and they should have done this when they built the coach, is I purchased a small cooling fan, which we're going to mount. We're going to put a hole in here in the metal plate. We're going to mount it in onto the metal plate so that it's blowing air into the panel box. And then I have a controller here, which is a thermostat controller, so it's not on all the time. I'll mount that somewhere in here too. I'm not sure where yet. And that'll control the fan until when it's too hot to kick it on and kick it off. And I purchased this fan purposely because it's 12 volts. And I have a nice 12 volt power supply right here, so I just added a circuit with a fuse adder and put it in. So that's going to be my positive lead, and then I'll just do a negative lead to the metal box because that's already grounded to the chassis. So that'll work really well for a power source. So the next step is to take the panel box cover off and then make my markings and determine where I have to put this so it doesn't interfere with anything behind here. And I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. Let me pull this panel box off, and then I'll show you what the inside looks like. Now that I've removed the panel box cover, this is all hot electricity, so it's live, so you have to be careful. This is where that board is that I had to replace, and I already did replace it. That was about a $300 part, but it's in, it's operating. So now I just have to figure out where I'm going to place this fan on the cover. I may have to just put a hole in the cover and mount it on the outside of it instead of having it flush. Flush would be inside where the edges would match. On the outside would be just up a bit, so it's not interfering with anything. So what I have to determine is where I can put this where it's not going to arc across any of the electronics in here. So that's going to be my next challenge, so I'll figure that out. Then once I measure it, I'll show you where I measured it, and then we'll cut this with the saber saw, metal blade, and then we'll get it all installed and wired up. Just so you know the components, these are your breakers, circuit breakers for the 110 volt system. This is 110 volt going in, plus there are some 12 volt connections on the other side. And this little ring right here is the sensor that determines whether you have 50 amp or 30 amp, and that would show you on the front power board's display what the amperage is that you're bringing in. So this is actually the sensor that controls the relays in this power board that determines what comes on and when it comes on. So that's how the power management system works. So what I did was I measured where the holes are so it lines up where there's no interference. My control board's going to go up here, and my fan I'm going to put on the outside of the panel because I decided there's too many electrical contacts that are accessible on the inside. I didn't want to shorting out of anything. So I measured it with the ruler and tape measure, squared it off, then I put masking tape on. So when I take my saw and I cut it, I'm not going to scratch up the painted area. So what I'll do is I'll drill holes, a hole in each corner for my saber saw blade to go into, and then I'll just take my saber saw and make straight cuts, and the piece will fall right out. And then this will snap into that hole, and then I'll mount this onto the plate right here, and the fan will be on the outside, and it'll cool off just fine. And then I'll just have to make an area where the door that can bring air in. So instead of putting vents in the door like we have here, because I don't have that available, I'm going to move the catches out a little bit so when the door shuts, it doesn't shut all real tight, and I'll have a gap behind here and you won't see it. So that's how we're going to keep this cool. So my next step is I'm going to drill holes in the corner, and then once I do that, take my saber saw and cut out the holes, with straight lines with the metal blade, and then we'll mount the hardware and get it up and running. Okay, what I did was I got a step drill bit, which is this, and I'm going to make a hole big enough to fit the saber saw blade, so I have to go down to the second one, and I drilled it in 2 corners, one here and one here, and then I'll take my saw and I'll cut over, cut over, cut over, cut over, then I'll have a square. And I did the exact same thing on this one up top, and I've already completed that. So I have my square for my thermostat, and this will be the square for the fan housing. So I'll just take my saber saw and cut across, and then the square will fall out. Okay, this is what the final cutout looks like. I removed the tape, and I'll just get rid of my pencil marks before I mount anything. And my thermostat will snap in here. I have to drill 4 holes yet to mount the plate for my fan, which I'll do next. And I'll show you how we wire it up. I've just sat the thermostat in and the fan. Now I'm going to mount the fan with the 4 screw holes in the corners. So I'm just going to drill pilot holes, and that comes with screws, and I'll mount those in. And then we'll go to the back and do the wiring. Okay, so I have my thermostat mounted, my fan mounted, my screen on both sides, and what I did on the back was, my thermostat was a little loose because my hole was a little too large, so I just put some double-faced tape on each side, and that secured that in, and I put a wire mount here to keep the wires up against the face. The wiring goes from the fan to the controller. This can control 4 fans by just having it in the number 1, and then this line here is the thermostat, which is this. And we're just going to have that dangle in the air and just make sure it's not near any open wires that, like over in this section, it could short it out, because we don't want that to happen. And the only other power line you need coming in is this outlet right here. And what I did was I took the power cord and I determined which was the positive and the negative, and the positive was the white stripe. So I connected it to my auxiliary fuse right here that I had installed, ran the wire through the back of the cabinet and then in, and then I grounded it, the negative, to the box, and I got a good 12, actually 13 volts coming out, so that was really good when I tested it. And this is just going to plug into the back here, and that'll power the whole fan unit. Then we can program it to make it work the way we want, and that'll keep this area cool. And then I'll slide these out a little bit so that when the cabinet shuts, there's a little gap between there, so the air will suck in and go into the cabinet, because I'm blowing it in instead of sucking it out. So I'm going to take cold air from out here and put it into the unit here to keep it cool. So I'm going to reassemble this, and I'll show you the end product. Now that I have the cabinet replaced, I ended up making one modification. I had to take the back screen off because it was hitting the board, and the board was too close to the cover, and I couldn't get a good snug fit on the cover, so I wasn't happy with the installation. So I took that off. And then I followed the instructions on the back of the programming package of how to program it. I decided to Fahrenheit instead of Celsius, and then I set a start temperature and a stop temperature. And it's working now. It's going to shut off if it gets to 75, I believe, and I have it turning on when it gets as hot as 85. I'll probably adjust that yet to different temperatures, but I just want to see if the fan works, and it is working. So my next step is to get the closet door so that when they shut, there's a little gap here so that the air can suck in to blow the air into the cabinet without having to put vents here. And the final step, which I haven't received yet, I've ordered them, is I'm putting little vent louvers underneath the cabinet so that, once again, that'll air the cabinet so I get constant circulation. So it'll blow the air in and then blow it out. So I'm real happy with that. It looks very neat and professional, and that should save the life of that board. Instead of having to replace it every 5 or 6 years, that should let it go for a good 10 years just because it's now keeping cool and it's not getting hot. Don't forget to keep watching us, and subscribe down below, because you never know what we're going to get into, and we want you to learn from our experiences to make your RVing life easier. So we'll see you next time. Bye.